There's a smell that doesn't exist in the world anymore. The smell of beans that sat all night in an old iron pot. But what my grandmother did with those beans during her secret midnight vigil held a power I never understood until the night she died in my arms. For 40 years, Grandma Ruth performed the same mysterious ritual every single evening. She'd take the leftover beans from supper and carry them out to the wood stove on the back porch. Then she'd sit there in her rocking chair for exactly 2 hours, just watching that pot. Never reading, never talking, just watching. Everyone thought she was losing her mind. But what I discovered about her nightly bean vigil will change how you think about prayer, presence, and the hidden sacrifices our grandmothers made to keep their families protected. If you've ever wondered about the strange rituals your elders performed that seemed to make no sense, subscribe to this channel to uncover the sacred wisdom disguised as simple country habits. Because what our grandmothers called just cooking was actually the most powerful spiritual warfare you've ever witnessed. Tonight I'm sharing her secret for the first time, and I promise you, by the end of this story, you'll never look at leftover food the same way again. Grandma Ruth's farmhouse sat on 40 acres just outside Harmony Grove, Kentucky, where the tobacco fields stretched to the horizon and time moved the way God intended. It was 1968. I was 8 years old, and the world felt like it was spinning out of control. The Vietnam War was tearing families apart. Civil rights protests filled the evening news. Everything seemed angry and uncertain. But inside Grandma Ruth's kitchen, peace lived in the smell of cornbread and the sound of beans bubbling on the stove. Every evening at exactly 6 o'clock, she'd perform the same ritual that puzzled everyone in our family. She'd take the big cast iron pot of beans from dinner, the one that weighed more than I did, and instead of putting the leftovers in the icebox, like any sensible person, she'd carry it out to the wood stove on the screened back porch. "Grandma, why don't you just put them in the refrigerator?" I'd ask, following behind her like a curious puppy. "Because the icebox kills the soul of the food," she'd answer in that matter-of-fact way of hers. "Beans need to breathe all night. They need to talk to the air. They need to dream about tomorrow." I thought it was old-fashioned nonsense, the kind of backward thinking that came from growing up without modern conveniences. She'd light just 3 small pieces of kindling under that pot. Never a big fire, just enough to keep the beans barely simmering. And she'd leave the lid cracked open, always cracked open. "They need to breathe," she'd explain when I asked why. "You shut that lid tight and they'll suffocate. Suffocated beans don't nourish right." Then came the part that made no sense to anyone. She'd drag her rocking chair right up next to that wood stove, and she'd sit there for exactly 2 hours, from 6 to 8 every single night, just rocking slowly and staring at that pot of beans, not reading her Bible, not mending clothes, not shelling peas or snapping green beans like other grandmothers, just sitting, just watching, just being present with a pot of leftover food. "What are you doing out there, Grandma?" I'd ask from the doorway. "I'm keeping watch," she'd say without taking her eyes off that pot. "Watching for what?" "For peace." I didn't understand what kind of peace needed watching, or why beans required a guard, or why anyone would waste 2 hours every evening staring at food. "Come sit beside me," she'd say some evenings, "but you have to be quiet. Just watch." So I would, sitting cross-legged on the old braided rug beside her chair, staring at that pot that bubbled so gently it seemed to be whispering secrets to the evening air. It was hypnotic. The soft sound of the beans warming, the smell spreading slowly through the porch screens, the thin wisps of steam curling up like prayers. "See how it breathes," she'd whisper, and it did. The lid would rise and fall slightly, like the pot had lungs. At exactly 8 o'clock, she'd bank the fire, but leave the pot sitting there all night, cooling slowly, talking to the darkness. "Why don't you bring it inside, Grandma?" "Because the night is important for the beans. That's when they get their wisdom. That's when the magic happens." One night in December of 1969, I couldn't sleep. It was bitter cold, and I'd been having nightmares about my daddy, who was somewhere in Vietnam. I got up to find Grandma Ruth, thinking maybe she'd make me some warm milk and honey. I found her on the back porch, at midnight, in her flannel nightgown and worn slippers, sitting in that rocking chair next to the cold wood stove, staring at the pot of beans. "Grandma, what are you doing out here? You'll catch your death of cold." "I'm listening," she whispered, pulling me onto her lap and wrapping her shawl around both of us. "Listening to what?" "To the beans telling me about their day." We sat there together in the darkness of that screened porch, the December wind whistling through the tobacco barn, the bare branches of the old oak scratching against the tin roof. "Listen," she whispered in my ear, and I heard it. A sound so faint, I wasn't sure if I was imagining it. Like the pot had a heartbeat, a slow, steady pulse. "That's the beans cooling," she explained. "That's the sound of peace settling in." Something about sitting there with her, wrapped in her warmth, listening to the rhythm of cooling beans, made my nightmares about Daddy seem smaller, less frightening. "The beans know about your daddy," she said softly. "They've been holding him in their thoughts all day." "Beans think about people?" "Everything thinks when it's made with love, child. And our beans are made with powerful love." That night, I slept better than I had in weeks. And somewhere across the ocean, there was another moment of empty. Park, silence, and dark, and long. "How are you doing?" "I'm very sorry for any disruption." My daddy was safe for another day. As I got older, I started noticing something miraculous about Grandma Ruth's overnight beans. Every morning at 5 o'clock, she'd rekindle that fire with the same ritual precision. Never big flames, just gentle warmth to wake the beans slowly. But something incredible had happened during the night. Those leftover beans had transformed into something completely different. The flavor was deeper, richer. The broth had thickened into something that tasted like liquid comfort. The aroma that filled the morning kitchen was like heaven wrapped in smoke. "How do they change so much, Grandma?" "Time," she'd say simply. "Time is the best seasoning there is. Time and patience and someone caring enough to keep watch." I grew up thinking every family cooked beans this way, with ritual, with vigil, with 2 hours of evening presence. It wasn't until I got married and moved to Louisville that I discovered how wrong I was. Nobody else made beans like Grandma Ruth. Nobody else kept the midnight watch. I tried to recreate her recipe. Left beans on the stove overnight, but they didn't taste right. Something was missing, the most important ingredient of all. I called her, desperate. "Grandma, my overnight beans don't taste like yours. What am I doing wrong?" She laughed that gentle laugh that only grandmothers possess. "Honey child, you're doing everything right. You're just forgetting one thing." "What's that?" "You're forgetting to talk to them, to keep them company. Beans left alone overnight just become old beans. They only become magic beans when someone shows they care." That's when I understood the secret wasn't in the beans, it was in the vigil. It was in the care. It was in the love that Grandma Ruth poured into those 2 hours of presence every evening. "You have to sit with them," she explained over the phone. "You have to show them they matter. You have to pay attention." "But Grandma, I work. I don't have time to sit and watch beans for 2 hours every night." "Then your beans will just be regular beans," she said. "Overnight beans are for people who have time to love properly." I cried after that phone call because I realized I was losing more than a recipe. I was losing a way of loving, a way of caring, a tradition that was dying with my generation. I decided to change my life because of those beans. I reorganized my schedule, left work earlier, turned off the television, and went back to keeping the evening vigil. The first few times were torture. I was restless, impatient. I kept checking my watch every 5 minutes, thinking about all the productive things I could be doing. But gradually, something shifted inside me. Those 2 hours became sacred. They became my time of silence, my time of peace, my time to talk to God without distractions. And the beans started tasting like Grandma Ruth's again. Not just the flavor, but the feeling, the comfort they brought, the peace they carried. My children began sitting with me, just like I used to sit with her. And they learned, without my teaching them, that some things can't be rushed, that the best things in life happen slowly. "Why do we do this, Mama?" they'd ask. Because the beans need to know someone cares about them, and we need to learn how to be still, to take our time with important things. Years later, when my youngest was in college, she called me homesick and crying. "Mama, everything here is so fast, so loud, so angry. I feel lost." "Come home," I told her. "Come sit the bean vigil with me." She drove 4 hours that night just to sit on the porch with me and watch a pot of leftover beans, to remember what peace felt like, to reconnect with the rhythm of love that doesn't hurry. The next morning, she said, "I understand now why Grandma Ruth did this. It wasn't about the beans at all." What was it about? It was about choosing to stay, even when you could leave, even when you had other things to do. It was about making love visible through presence. Grandma Ruth was 93 when she called me to her bedside for the last time. It was a Tuesday morning in March 1985. The daffodils were just starting to push through the cold Kentucky soil, and something in the air felt like endings. "Betty Sue," she said in a voice barely above a whisper, "I need you to make me a promise." "Anything, Grandma. Tonight I want you to keep the bean vigil for me. I don't have the strength to get to that porch anymore." "Of course, Grandma, but you'll be keeping it with me again soon." She smiled that smile that said she knew things I didn't. "Child, my watching days are about over, but the beans still need someone to care. The family still needs someone to hold the peace." That evening, I sat on her porch for what I didn't know would be the last time, with her still breathing inside the house. I kept watch over a pot of her beans, thinking about 40 years of nightly vigils, 40 years of choosing presence over productivity. Around midnight, I heard her calling my name. I found her trying to get out of bed, weak but determined. "I need to check the beans," she said. "They're fine, Grandma. I'm watching them." "No, child. I need to see them one more time." I helped her to the porch, wrapped her in every quilt we could find. She looked at that pot with such tenderness, such love. "They've been faithful companions," she said. "Every night for 40 years, through your granddaddy's death, through the war, through all the worry and all the joy. They never failed to carry my prayers." "Your prayers, Grandma?" "Every bubble that rises from that pot carries a prayer for this family. Every night I sit here, I'm not just watching beans. I'm watching over all of you, holding you in love, keeping vigil for your safety, your happiness, your souls." She died at dawn, peacefully, with the smell of overnight beans drifting through her bedroom window. At her funeral, the preacher said something I'll never forget. Ruth Henderson didn't just feed bodies, she fed souls. And somewhere in heaven, I believe she's still keeping watch over a pot of beans, praying for every person she loved. Today, 38 years later, I still keep the bean vigil. Every night from 6 to 8, my granddaughter sits with me now, asking the same questions I once asked. "Why do we do this, Grandma?" Because someone needs to choose to stay. Someone needs to hold the space for love. Someone needs to show that some things are worth waiting for. If this story stirred something in your heart, I want you to know that someone, somewhere, has probably kept vigil for you too. Maybe it was a grandmother with a pot of beans. Maybe it was a mother who checked on you one extra time each night. Maybe it was someone who loved you in ways you're only now beginning to understand. Share this story with someone who needs to remember the power of presence. Comment below about the simple rituals your family performed that held more love than you realized, and subscribe to this channel for more forgotten stories of how our elders transformed ordinary moments into sacred acts of devotion. Next week, I'm going to tell you about what I found inside Grandma Ruth's recipe box after she died. Hidden between her cornbread recipe and her instructions for canning peaches was a letter she'd written to each of her grandchildren. What she revealed about the secret ingredients she'd been adding to our food will make you weep. Some recipes feed the body, others feed the soul, and a few blessed recipes do both. Until then, remember, you are held in love, you are prayed for, and somewhere, someone is still keeping watch over the things that matter most.